We're about to open up a book. It's really the book. It's kind of hard to introduce because this book is, in a certain sense, the introduction for every other book. So what I think we should do is just jump in. And then afterwards, we'll talk a little bit about what is the Torah. The way we're going to do it in this class for the year is we're going to be aided by a sage who lived in the 11th century named Rabbi Shlomo Yitzchaki, otherwise known as Rashi. Anyone heard of Rashi before? Rashi. Rashi was a regular rabbi. He lived in France, he studied a lot, and he decided that the world was lacking a consistent commentary on the Torah that would seek to answer all of the grammatic and idiomatic and syntactical inconsistencies, let's say. All the things that if you were to read it straight through in Hebrew, you would want to ask certain questions just based on the language. And based on that, he came up with his comprehensive commentary. Now, Rashi was not the Pope. He wasn't ordained with any superior sense of knowledge, of understanding, or authority than any other person. The reason why we read the Torah with Rashi is because for about 1,000 years, generation after generation after generation, decided that Rashi's commentary was the most foundational work that you could possibly use to understand the Chumash. And so in a similar way to how the Torah is the basis for all of Western society and morality, although it may have been corrupted since then, but it really is the source of it. And that almost all of the literature we read and the very language of morality that we use, that we're not even thinking about, is based in the Torah. The same is true for a lot of the way that as Jews we understand the Torah. It's through the lens of Rashi. So important is Rashi that over 100 commentaries have been written on Rashi's commentary to the Torah. That's how much effort has been put into trying to understand what he's trying to teach us. So the Torah itself is, as Jews, we understand it's written by God. Rashi is here to help us understand how a human is meant to approach that book. So that's what we're going to use in this class. Now, I think maybe it was recommended that you buy one of these sets of Chumash Rashi. Highly, highly recommended. This, for me, this class, when I sat in it, 17 years ago, this was the floor that I stood on, that I continue to build upon even today. So it's a worthwhile investment to get yourself a copy of this series, this set of Chumash with Rashi. Now, for those who don't have the book in front of you, I asked Ethan to just take a picture and put it on the WhatsApp group so that we can all follow along. Are there any questions so far? Yes, Ben.
So when was Rashi around?
Rashi lived in the 11th century.
Okay. And is he also the same Rashi who made the classic commentary of the Talmud?
Yes. Rashi not only wrote an entire commentary on all of the books of the Torah, not just the 5 books of Moses, but also the prophets and the writings. He writes throughout all of it. He also wrote a comprehensive commentary on the Talmud, which is, again, the first thing that we read in addition to and in accompaniment to the Talmud. Rashi is everything. Rashi is our teacher.
So there weren't any commentaries for like 1,000 years?
Say that again?
There weren't any commentaries for like 1,000 years?
There appears to have been a rupture in tradition around the time that Rashi was alive, such that those who were studying in their respective yeshivas had a direct transmission from their teachers as to how to understand and comprehend the Torah. But at a certain point in history, and we find this in Jewish history often, is that there is a period of rupture, of change, of dramatic change, from the generation before to the generation afterwards, and that requires a whole lot of creative effort to try to fill in the gaps of what we're missing from the previous generation. And so that's what Rashi's trying to do. I'll add one more note, which is that, as you'll see, Rashi will often refer to what's known as the Medrash. How many of you know what the oral Torah is? Just a quick raise of hands. Okay, so about half. The oral Torah, it's a much longer discussion, and I'm sure a lot will be spoken about it here. The oral Torah is a oral compendium to the written Torah, the 5 books of Moses that is in front of you now. It was given, as according to Jewish tradition, at Mount Sinai and through the 40 years in the desert, and it is essentially a verbal comprehension, an explanation of the Torah itself. The text is highly, highly condensed. How many of you have opened up a page of the Talmud already? Did you guys do that this morning?
Yeah.
Okay, so which tractate, which Masechta are you guys learning? Bava Metzia.
Chapter 2.
Bava Metzia? Okay, so Bava Metzia chapter 2, what is that?
Elu Metzia.
Elu Metzias. Okay, Elu Metzias, which is all about
Metzia.
returning lost objects. Okay, now Elu Metzias is a hefty work. It's about 15 pages or so, front and back, but that's not being fair to how much is actually found in that 15 pages. Because in that 15 pages, you'll find probably thousands and thousands of pages of commentary that have been written on those 15 pages, elucidating and explaining all of the different details of how exactly one is to fulfill their obligation of returning a lost object. How many verses in the Torah are dedicated to the laws of returning lost objects? And by the way, it's in this week's Torah portion.
I think we saw like 4 lines.
About 4 lines. So from 4 lines in the Torah comes 15 pages of Talmud and thousands of pages of commentary explaining what returning a lost object actually entails. So the Torah is a very, very, very highly condensed work, and as a result, in order to capture the essence of the Torah, the oral Torah was given alongside of it. Why? Because a written Torah can't nearly convey all of the meaning and all of the depth and all of the spirit of the law that needs to be given from teacher to student. So that's what the oral Torah is. So Rashi is giving us an insight not just into how he understands the Torah, but also into how the sages of the Talmud lived about 2,000 years ago, how they understood the Talmud as well. And that's extremely important for us to know, because it really plugs us into a living chain of where are we and where do I sit in those generations. It's me having a conversation and a dialogue with a rabbi who lived 2,000 years ago, 1,000 years ago, 500 years ago, 200 years ago, and we're all joining in on that conversation. So isn't that exciting? Did you have another question? Did I answer your question?
I did.
Okay. Any other questions before we begin? Great. Yes, Daniel. It doesn't, because it doesn't, unless you know how to read Rashi script, which is not regular Hebrew block letters. It does not translate Rashi for you. So, yeah.
So, is it correctly here we have also some commentary from Artscroll?
Yeah, we don't need that right now.
Okay, my question would be, so if I could get myself Rashi Chumash in German, for example, it's a Hebrew German.
Sure.
I feel more comfortable with it.
Go for it.
That's fine.
Whatever you prefer.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So, if anyone does not have the Chumash Rashi version in English, let's open up our phones. I hope what we'll try to do is, for tomorrow and onwards, I'll try to arrange so that we have a few copies of the text that we're going to be studying, so that we don't have to be doing it on our phones. I think everybody at this point recognizes that it's far better to be non-phone oriented in a classroom. So let's start from the beginning, literally. Can I ask for a volunteer who would like to read the beginning? Great. Let's do it. Let's start with it in English, and then we'll and then we'll go from there. Yeah. Why don't you just read the first chapter, the first verse of the Torah, and then the first Rashi.
In English.
Yeah.
In the beginning of God's creating the entire first verse. Okay.
Yeah. That's just, it's not very much.
Right. In the beginning of God's creating the heavens and the earth.
Okay, so already you'll notice that the way that Ethan read it is maybe slightly different to the way that you have probably heard it. And the reason why is because this version of the Chumash is translating the Torah according to the way that Rashi is going to explain it to us. Now we will soon see. Okay? Now we're usually used to hearing in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. We'll see why we actually can't translate it that way. We'll see that in a little bit. But right now, before we get into the text, go for it. Just read the first Rashi there. It's a little bit hard to read because it's interlinear, but I'm sure you can go for it.
Okay. So in the beginning of Rashi says.
No, Rabbi Yitzchak.
Oh, is that not Rashi? Oh, okay.
No.
Okay.
So Rabbi Yitzchak is one of the rabbis of the Talmud.
Okay.
Yeah?
Okay. Rabbi Yitzchak said, God need not have begun the Torah, but from this month shall be for you the beginning of the months, because it is the first commandment which Israel was commanded. What is the reason that he began with the book of Genesis? It began thus because he wished to convey the message of the verse. Koach ma'asav higid la'amo.
You're doing great.
The power of his acts he told to his people. Goyim, in order to give them the estate of nations. Keep going.
Yep.
Okay.
I want everyone to be as absolutely confused as possible.
Yeah, I'm already
Keep
confused.
going,
Okay.
keep going. It's good to just read out the whole thing aloud, and then we'll figure out what we don't know.
Okay. She'im, Yomro.
You can just read it in English
Okay.
if that's easier.
Okay, that's fine. It's good practice for me otherwise too. Anyway, I'll read it in English though. So that if the nations of the world will say to Israel, you are bandits, for you conquered the lands of the 7 nations who inhabited the land of Canaan. Israel will say to them, the whole earth belongs to the Holy One, blessed is He. He created it and He gave it to the one found proper in His eyes. By His wish He gave it to them, and by His wish He took it from them and gave it to us.
Whew! Well done, Ethan. That was pretty good. Okay, first Rashi. Great. Step 1. Step 1 to understanding Rashi is just figuring out what on earth he's saying. Okay? Now, there's a rhythm and a rhyme to how Rashi works. Rashi is always asking a specific question on the text. Always asking a specific question on the text. So our first job is to figure out what is Rashi's question. That's the first thing we need to do. So let's just go a little slowly. We'll break it down bit by bit. And then I want you guys to speak to each other and try to figure it out. Okay. He invokes a person named Rabbi Yitzchak. So Rashi is now plugging us into the chain of transmission, telling us that there is something that we can learn from those who came before us. And Rabbi Yitzchak asked a really good question. This is how Rashi understands. This is a really good question. So we have to figure out, why is this question such a good question? The Torah really should have started somewhere else. The Torah should have started at the verse, HaChodesh hazeh lechem, which means, this month shall be for you, and then it continues the first month. Does anyone know where this verse is to be found?
It's right after the Jews were freed from Egypt.
Well done, Austin. It was right before the Jews were freed from Egypt. This was, if you fast forward several hundred years into the future, well, at this point, Bereshit, 7,000 years into the future, right? Right before the Jewish people are on the cusp of being freed from the Egyptians, right? Pharaoh. God, in preparation for their becoming a free people, gives Moses to give to the Jewish people the first commandment that is meant for the Jewish people as a whole. And the first commandment is something called sanctifying the moon. In other words, the Jewish people were entrusted with the ability to testify when a new month begins. Why would that be important for us to know when a new month begins? For the holidays, right? our holidays are based on the lunar calendar. And so many of the holidays fall out on the 15th of the month, or the 1st of the month, or the 10th of the month, or whatever it might be. And in order for us to know when, for example, Passover starts, it's pretty important for us to know that, right? Because if Passover started yesterday and I was eating a bagel, well then I've done something pretty drastically wrong. In order for me to know that, I need to know when the month is. So the first commandment given to the Jewish people is, you need to know that you are in charge of deciding when the new month begins. That's the first commandment, the first mitzvah given to the Jewish people. All the way, thousands of years later, in the second book of the Torah, Rashi says, we should really be starting the Torah from there. That means skip out all of Genesis, the whole Garden of Eden story. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, everything. Skip it all out and just fast forward to the first mitzvah in the Torah. That's Rashi's question. It says, why are we getting such a big introduction to all of that? That's Rashi's.
So before that, there's not a single mitzvah in the whole...
Oh, there is. Okay. Hold on. We'll get there. I just want to go through the Rashi, and then we'll ask all the questions we want. Okay? You guys with me? Rashi wants to know, why are we starting the Torah from here? We should have started the Torah in the second book, where it starts talking about the mitzvahs. That's what we're here for. We're here to do mitzvahs. Why? He says, why do we start from Bereshis, from in the beginning? Because, and now he invokes a verse from a chapter of Tehillim, Psalms. Do you guys know what Psalms are? Heard of that? Though I walk in the shadow of the valley of death, I shall fear no evil. No? Never heard that? Come on, you guys got to go listen to some 90s rap music and you'll hear Gangster's Paradise, and then he knows more Tehillim than you guys do. Come on. All right, and it invokes a passage that says that the strength of his acts he told to his people to give to them the inheritance of the nations. What on earth does that mean? Well, he'll tell us. It says, if the nations of the world will come to you and tell you, you're all thieves, who could relate to that? It's amazing how this was written over 1,000 years ago, and we are still living with this today. It's unbelievable. If the nations should hypothetically come to you and tell you that you're all thieves because you all conquered the lands of the 7 nations. A little bit of Jewish history. After the Jews wander in the desert for 40 years, they are led into the land of modern-day Israel by Joshua, and they go about conquering the land from the 7 nations that live there already. So what's our response? They say, you stole it. You're settler colonialists. How dare you? What do we say? We're going to say, the land belongs to God. That's our answer. The land belongs to God. How do we know? Because He created it. He created it, and therefore He's allowed to give it to whomever He finds proper in His eyes. He decided to give it to them, and He decided to take it away from them and give it to us. Okay. Step 1. What's Rashi's question? We kind of figured that out already, but who can paraphrase? Lewis?
Why did the Torah start where it does?
Right. Why did the Torah start where it does? Now, this is an interesting Rashi because this is more of a meta-textual question. In other words, we're not necessarily asking a question on any particular word. We're asking a question on the entire order of the Chumash, of the Torah. By the way, when I say the word Chumash, the word Chamesh means 5 in Hebrew. So Chumash means the 5 books of Moses. Okay, just for anybody who didn't know. So we're asking a question on the meta-text and saying, why did it start here? Now there are those who suggest that Rashi is actually asking a question on the text itself. And they say Rashi is addressing the fact that there might actually be a superfluous, an extra word here that did not need to be written. What word might that be?
In the beginning.
In the beginning. Why is that an extraneous word?
It's implied.
Because it's the first word of the book.
Because it's the beginning of the book. You don't need any novel to tell you this is the beginning of the book. This is the beginning. We know it's the beginning. So there's one way of reading this Rashi as coming to answer a very specific textual question, which is, God wrote this book, which means that there's nothing flowery or poetic or superfluous about the book. Every word is intentional and is there to teach us something. And if it's not there for any reason, then we've got to figure out why it's there. So that's a very important rule that we're going to have to use when reading and looking at the Torah through a critical eye is, what's this coming to tell me? Could I have done without this word? And if so, then I don't fully understand the nature of the word. Okay? Does everyone understand Rashi's question? Number one, Rashi's question is either why is the Torah arranged in this way? Or question number two, the second way of understanding it is, what is the word in the beginning coming to do here? Okay? Now, what is his answer? Why does the Torah begin here? It should have started from the beginning of the mitzvahs given to the Jewish people. What's his answer?
So that
One second. I just want to, just so that we can have just a little bit of decorum. I apologize. I know it's very third grade of me, but if we can just do hand raising, I appreciate it. Thank you. Daniel, right? No, Cole. Cole.
It's the terminology that God uses to start Rashi is in the beginning because it gives the reader and the audience a perspective to believe without a doubt that God was the first to create the world, and thus we must understand everything else in this book to be true.
Okay. So God gave us. Now hold on a second, Cole. I appreciate that you are you're jumping a couple steps ahead. You've given me a little bit of a interpretation of Rashi's answer, which is great, and I want to do that in a little bit. But right now, all I want is just to get absolutely crystal clear, what does Rashi say? Before we start interpreting Rashi, what does he say? What is he saying? Ben, you want to give a crack at it?
He's saying so that we can defend our right to Israel.
Right. Rashi's saying the reason why we have all of this run-up to all the mitzvahs, the entire book of Genesis, Adam and Eve and Abraham and all patriarchs, matriarchs, and the slavery in Egypt, all of that is in order to teach us that God created the world, and therefore when people come to us with a claim that we don't have a right to this land, we can say, no, we do. God created the world. He runs the world, and he can give it to us if he wants to. Okay. There are a lot of questions on this Rashi, and that's why after step one is asking, what is Rashi's question? After step two is trying to figure out exactly what is his answer. Now we can move to the fun part, which is step three. Step three is, what are our questions on Rashi's answer? In the same way that Rashi looks at the text with a critical eye, we now get to look at Rashi with a critical eye. And we're going to ask all of the relevant questions that we need to know to understand, what does Rashi's answer mean? What does it mean? Why did he answer like this? Is there any other information that we need to know? Are there any assumptions that he's making that we don't understand? Is he answering his own question? So these are all the questions that we need to be asking. I don't want answers right now. I just want questions. There is a big, important thing for everybody to know in this room, which is a lot of you maybe think you're coming here for answers, but we're really coming here for questions. The better we can define our questions, the better we can have very, very good answers. So what I'd like you to do is take the person next to you. Spend the next minute or so coming up with all of the different questions that you have on Rashi's answer. Okay? Go for it. I'll see you back in a minute. Can I just borrow your thing?
Can you read it?
I can read it. Don't worry. Yeah. It's easier than reading Rashi. Go for it. See you back in a minute. Okay. Gentlemen, let's come back together. There is a lot to talk about. I'm sure that you guys were just in the middle of asking half of your questions, but maybe collectively we can come up with a whole bunch of them. All right, who's got a question on Rashi? Cole.
My man Sam over here asked
why jump straight to Israel when defending, when using the syntax to defend God's creation and His purpose?
Why jump straight to Israel?
Yeah, it says, in order to give the state of the nation, if the nations of the world will say to Israel, for you conquered the land of the seven nations who
Yeah.
have the land of
So-
I also have a question.
So let me just try to understand your question. The question, Sam, is why is Israel so important?
Yes, like why is that his first justification to why the book should start with like,
Good.
the month?
Great.
Like why does it go to that?
Yeah, there's a lot of answers that this book provides. I mean, there's a lot of reasons why we could include this book. So why is it so important for us to know that we have a legitimate right to Israel? I mean, I'm sure that's very important, right? It's important today. But there's so many things that we need to know. So why Israel? Why specifically this land? Okay? And Cole, you said you had another question?
Yeah, the last pasuk by Rashi doesn't just the wording doesn't really make sense. By His wish He gave it to them, and by His wish He took it from them and gave it to us. Like, who's He giving to, and then taking from, and then
Okay.
giving it back?
So just clarification. I think what he's saying is He allowed the seven nations to live there, right? Which is effectively giving people the land. And then He took it from them. When we successfully conquered the land of Israel, it's in effect giving it to us. Yeah. And we might have questions on that, but I think that's the simple read in Rashi. Okay. Lewis and then Austin.
So where does Rabbi Yitzchak get this explanation? Like, does he just kind of come up with it? Does he say?
Great. Good. Okay. Lewis, I'm glad you asked that question. So as I've mentioned before, many times Rashi is coming from the oral Torah, the Midrash.
Right.
Rashi here is quoting a Midrash. Okay.
So Rabbi Yitzchak has this, but how does Rabbi Yitzchak come? So does Rabbi Yitzchak come to this explanation just through the unbroken chain from Moshe and Sinai through to the writing down of the Midrash?
Yeah. Now you're asking a really good question, which is, what is the authority of the oral Torah? Is the oral Torah just a bunch of rabbis who got together and decided that they have the right interpretation of the Torah, or is it something more than that? Right? Because I did tell you that for whatever this means, the oral Torah, in some sense, was passed down from Moses. And yet, anybody who's ever opened up a page of Talmud knows that it's a whole bunch of rabbis who lived 2,000 years ago speaking. So which one is it? Is it Moses said this, Moses said that, Moses said this? Or is it Rabbi Yitzchak said this, and Abaye said that, and Rabbi Yehuda said this? So that's a really, really good question, and we'll hopefully get to that. But
this is not a question.
Yeah.
This is a Rashi's response to Rabbi Yitzchak's question, right?
The response itself is part of the Medrash. It's part of the Medrash. Medrash is a part of the oral Torah.
Okay.
So I'm using a lot of terms here, and we're going to unpack it all, hopefully. Okay, but for now, let's just try to, on our own terms, analyze the question and the answer. Okay, Austin, you had a question.
Yeah, so, what Ben's first question was: is this just like seems like we're kind of advocating for like a warmongering society, that whoever conquers a land has that means you have God's
Good.
stamp on it?
Great question.
And then my question was, like, is all that matters the mitzvahs? Like, does that mean why isn't the Torah just a list of 613 things?
Okay, fantastic, great. So Austin's got two good questions. Number one is, well, what does it mean that God gave it to us? Because if we had to conquer it in order for it to be given to us, does that mean that might makes right? Does that mean that that's our morality? That's a great question. And your second question is a big one. Rashi has an assumption here. Or Rabbi Yitzchak is making the assumption, but Rashi is publicizing it, which is, the assumption is that the Torah should begin at the mitzvahs. But who says that the Torah is a book of mitzvahs? Who says that that's the only purpose of this book? Maybe the Torah is stories and commandments, right? So that's a great question. That's a really good question. Okay, Azriel, and then Joey, and then Roy.
The question is, how did you deduct Rosh Chodesh from the sentence? Why not the beginning of the day or the beginning of the year? It's the beginning of the season, as we also count. Why specifically, how did we deduct?
Why do we count the months? Okay.
No, like why here specifically mentioned the beginning of the month? Why not the beginning of the day?
Yeah. So that happens to be the first commandment that God gives to Moses in Exodus. That's meant for the entire Jewish people.
In Exodus, yeah, but here, how do we know it's months, not day? Because
I'm not sure I understand your question.
how do we know that here at the beginning they say this regarding the months, not regarding the day or the season or the year? Like the Xera, or is it like what's...
Rashi is simply quoting a verse that comes in the book of Exodus, right?
Same verse?
The verse of Exodus says, the month will be for you the first of the month, right? So, Azrael, I think you have a deeper question, but we'll have to maybe try to figure it out maybe at the end. I want to keep going here because I'm mindful that we only got about 7 minutes to deal with the answers. Don't worry, whatever we don't finish now, we'll try to get to tomorrow. Okay, Joey?
We know that God isn't defined by time and space.
Okay.
By using the word beginning, it kind of creates that dimension of time, of creation. And we know that there may be there was nothingness before the world, but there was still something. So why the word beginning?
Okay, you're asking a fantastic question. It's really deep, and I love these types of questions personally. But in order for us not to become overwhelmed with the infinite number of questions that we could ask on this text, we need to start somewhere. And the somewhere that we're starting right now is with Rashi. So right now, you and I can have a very lovely conversation over a glass of whiskey about that question. But right now, we need to, just for the sake of staying sane, stay relevant to Rashi's questions and Rashi's answers. So I feel your pain. We want to know everything right away, but let's start from here and then we'll move outwards. Roy.
So you said that Torah isn't just a book of a list of commandments.
Right.
You said it's more than that. It's also stories.
Well, I mean, look at the book, right? We've got stories and we've got commandments. So where does Rashi get the assumption that the book is a book of commandments? That's the question that I think Austin was asking, and it's a very, very good question.
What should it try to teach us unless commandments?
What's that?
What should it try to teach us unless the mitzvahs? Like, what does it have to teach us?
Okay, so I think you've got a response to Austin, which is, why not the commandments? What else besides the commandments? Which is an interesting answer, but right now I want to stick with questions. Yes.
Why does
Ethan?
Rebbe Yitzhak think that why does he think that Israel was given to us by God and that God created the earth? That was like a justifiable answer for the goyim. Like, why is that justification in a world that it's since its conception? Obviously, that hasn't been a good enough answer for them.
Okay. I want you to imagine that you're now Ethan's brother Guy, and Guy right now is on campus at Columbia University, and Guy walks into the thicket of the encampments, where everybody's shouting and yelling and holding up signs and posters, and Guy hushes the audience and says, "My friends, the answer is simple. Just open up a Bible, and you will see that God created the world. And if God created the world, He owns the world. And if He owns the world, it means that He can give it to us. And that's why we have a legitimate claim to the land of Israel. Isn't it obvious? How many of you think that would be a satisfying answer for all of the protesters at Columbia University?
Linda with they, them pronouns.
Nobody would accept that as an answer. Not a single person. And if there was a single person who accepted that answer, that person's probably in the room right now. So how does Rashi get the gall to say that this is all in order to answer all of the non-Jews who call us thieves? Does anybody think that this is going to work for them? What does he mean? That's a great question. Okay? Really good question. So far, the questions I've heard. Do you have another question, Aaron? I don't want an answer yet. I just want questions.
No, but I'm saying like, how is that not? Because like these questions were made once other religions stemmed from Judaism, and they saw that that like wasn't acceptable to them.
No. There are, first of all, even in the Torah, there are other religions that have existed before Judaism, polytheistic religions, things like that. There have always existed, non-Jewish people, so they can certainly have a legitimate claim. Why do you feel like you deserve the land of Israel? Didn't you just steal it? And if our answer is, well, the Torah says that we're allowed to, that's a pretty weak answer for anybody who doesn't believe in the Torah. Right? Okay. So far, the questions that we have are the following. Number one, what is Rashi's assumption that the Torah is a book only about commandments? Where does he get that from? How do we know that that's true? Because the whole basis of the question is, we don't need these stories. We don't need the creation story. We don't need Adam and Eve. We don't need Abraham and Sarah and all of those people, because we really just need to jump to the mitzvahs. That's question number one. Question number two, question number two, why is Israel such a major factor here? Now, I want to strengthen your question, Sam, because I agree with you that it seems like talking about Israel is a little bit out of place. But I would phrase the question like this. Rashi's question is not congruent with his answer. Rashi's question was, why don't we start with the mitzvahs? The assumption being that this is a book about mitzvahs. Now his answer should be something to the effect of, because the beginning of the book tells us about mitzvahs. It's a preparation. It's some piece of vital information that we need to know in order to do the mitzvahs. Yes? That's what we would expect Rashi's answer would be. But his answer is actually, what this whole book of the Torah, the whole beginning of the Torah, is really telling us is about how to answer non-Jews when they say that we have stolen the land. What on earth does that have to do with mitzvahs? What does that have to do with mitzvahs? This is a book of mitzvahs. That was the question, right? So we can ask a very strong question on Rashi, which is, your answer does not fit with your question. You wanted to know why we start with non-mitzvahs if the whole book is about mitzvahs. And your answer is because it's telling us about our claim to the land of Israel. I'm not saying there's no answers to this. We will get to answers. So that's question number two. Question number three. Question number three is, who says that any non-Jew will ever listen to us if we whip out this claim? Oh, well, the Torah tells us it's ours, and therefore it's ours. And I'd say as maybe a subsection, we'll throw in Austin's question, which is, what does it mean that it's ours? We conquered it, and that means that God gave it to us. What does that say about our morality? Okay? These are massive, massive questions on Rashi that all require an answer. So your homework today is to sit on the basketball court or at the dinner table or smoking a hookah and talk about what you think the answers are to these three and a half questions. And then we'll come back and talk about it tomorrow. Okay? As a last addendum, this Chumash, this Torah, the Medrash says, is in a certain sense the blueprint of all of existence. The Torah itself is like the microfilm, which is being projected, and the universe is that projection. Which means that if we want to understand our universe, ourselves, we have to understand this book. The first thing we need to know about the universe and this book is that there are a lot of layers. And the superficial understanding is usually not the correct one. Our job is to be investigators. And in order to do that, we need to strengthen our ability to ask really good questions, to be really perceptive, and to look at all the inconsistencies and incongruities. And if you go through life, you'll notice, it's like, wait a minute, what's going on here? Why do people spend all of their time and effort seeking status and money and all kinds of things that they cannot really take with them after we're gone? Why are we spending so much time on things that don't make us that happy? there's a lot of questions about life that we could go around asking. This is what Chumash is teaching us to do. So the more we are able to understand the questions in Chumash, the more we'll be able to understand the questions and hopefully the answers in life. So I look forward to continuing in this exploration with you tomorrow.
Shkoyach.